At 4:17 a.m. on November 2, 1944, Sergeant Thomas Callahan sat behind a Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun on Hill 522 near Breakneck Ridge, Leyte, Philippines, watching 180 Japanese soldiers emerge from the jungle 400 yards below his position. 24 years old, former Pittsburgh steelworker, 47 days in combat. The rest of his squad was dead. His ammunition supply would run out in approximately 8 minutes of sustained fire. In the next 53 minutes, Callahan would kill 27 Japanese soldiers, wound an estimated 40 more, and break 3 separate banzai charges using a weapon modification he'd made with a pair of pliers and a broken belt buckle. The Imperial Japanese Army would retreat from Hill 522 for the first time in 4 days. Callahan would never receive official recognition for what happened that morning. This is the story of how one man with a modified machine gun changed defensive doctrine in the Pacific Theater. Thomas Callahan grew up in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His father worked the blast furnaces at Jones and Laughlin Steel. Tom started working the same furnaces at 16, lying about his age. The work was brutal. 12-hour shifts, temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees. Men lost fingers to the machinery, lost eyes to molten slag, lost their lives when pour spouts failed or crucibles cracked. Tom learned to read metal by color. Cherry red meant 2,500 degrees. Orange meant 2,000. Yellow-white meant danger. He learned to spot structural failure before it happened. A crack in a ladle, stress fractures in support beams, the slight sag that meant a walkway was about to collapse. He also learned to fix things that weren't supposed to be fixed. When equipment broke, you didn't wait for management approval. You grabbed tools and you repaired it. Welded cracked housings, jury-rigged hydraulic lines, bent safety regulations when the alternative was shutting down production and losing a day's wages. The foreman looked the other way because Tom's improvised repairs worked. They held. They lasted. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Tom enlisted January 15th, 1942. He was 21 years old. The Army assigned him to the infantry. He requested assignment to an armored unit or engineering corps, anywhere he could use his mechanical skills. Request denied. He shipped to basic training at Camp Wheeler, Georgia. Then advanced infantry training. Then jungle warfare school in Panama. Then across the Pacific to New Guinea. He joined the 24th Infantry Division, 34th Regiment, Charlie Company, 2nd Platoon in March 1944. The division was preparing for the invasion of the Philippines. General Douglas MacArthur had promised to return. The 24th Infantry would be part of that return. Tom's platoon landed on Leyte on October 20th, 1944. The initial landing was unopposed. They moved inland. The Japanese were waiting. The fighting became immediate and brutal. Not the sweeping maneuvers Tom had trained for. Close-range firefights in dense jungle. Ambushes, night infiltrations, banzai charges that came screaming out of vegetation so thick you couldn't see 30 feet. The problem became obvious within the first week. American defensive positions were getting overrun, not because of poor tactics or weak soldiers, because the Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun, the primary defensive weapon, couldn't traverse fast enough to stop a banzai charge once it got close. The M2 was an excellent weapon. Fired 450 to 600 rounds per minute. Effective range 2,000 yards. Could penetrate light armor. Could stop a charging enemy at 800 yards with ease. But it had a critical limitation. The traversing mechanism, the system that allowed the gunner to swing the weapon left and right, was designed for long-range, methodical fire, not for tracking fast-moving targets at close range. The Japanese had figured this out. Their doctrine adapted. Banzai charges would approach at an angle, forcing the gunner to traverse. Multiple waves would come from different directions simultaneously. The gunner would engage the first wave, kill 4 or 5 men, then try to traverse to the second wave. The traversing mechanism was too slow. By the time the gun swung to the new target, the second wave was already inside the gun's minimum engagement range. At that point, the fight devolved into bayonets and grenades. Tom watched this happen 3 times in the first 2 weeks. First time, November 1st. Private First Class. Eddie Morrison was on the gun. Japanese charged from 2 directions. Eddie killed the first wave. 6 men down in 8 seconds. Beautiful shooting. Then he tried to swing the gun to engage the second wave coming from the right. The traverse was too slow. The Japanese were on the position before Eddie could bring the gun to bear. Eddie died with a bayonet through his chest. He was 19 years old. From Topeka, Kansas. Second time, November 3rd. Corporal James Chen took over Eddie's position. Chinese-American kid from San Francisco. Calm, under fire, excellent gunner. Japanese tried the same tactic. Chen anticipated. He traversed early, engaging the second wave before they got close, but a third wave came from the left. Chen couldn't traverse fast enough. He killed 4 men before they overran his position. Chen took a grenade, died instantly. 22 years old. Third time, November 5th. Sergeant William Donovan volunteered for the gun. Irish kid from Boston, tough as nails. Tom had served with Donovan since New Guinea. They'd shared a foxhole during the Aitape campaign. Donovan had pulled Tom out of a river when Tom's gear dragged him under during a river crossing. Now Donovan was behind the M2. Japanese came from 3 directions simultaneously. Donovan killed the center wave, traversed right, killed 3 men from the right wave, started to traverse left. Too slow. The left wave reached the position. Donovan drew his sidearm and fought hand to hand. He killed 2 more Japanese with his M1911 before a sword cut nearly severed his arm. He bled out before the medic could reach him. 24 years old, Tom helped carry Donovan's body back to the aid station. Donovan's blood soaked through Tom's uniform. Tom sat in the jungle for an hour after they buried Donovan. The numbers were obvious. Charlie Company had lost 11 men to overrun machine gun positions in 16 days. That was 38% of their KIA. Other companies were reporting similar losses. The M2 was an excellent gun, but the Traverse was killing its operators. Tom examined the weapon that night. The Traverse mechanism consisted of a screw assembly with a hand crank. The gunner turned the crank, which rotated a threaded shaft, which moved the gun mount left or right. Precise, controlled, perfect for engaging distant targets. Completely inadequate for tracking multiple close-range threats. The gun could physically traverse faster. The mounting hardware allowed it. The limitation was the screw mechanism. Too much mechanical advantage in the wrong direction. It took 12 full rotations of the hand crank to swing the gun 90 degrees. In combat, that was 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough time for a charging soldier to cover 40 yards. Tom mentioned this to First Lieutenant Robert McKenna, the platoon leader. "Sir, the Traverse on the M2 is getting men killed. If we could bypass the screw assembly and traverse manually, we could track targets faster." McKenna looked at him. "The Traverse is designed that way for a reason, Sergeant. Controlled fire. Accuracy. Accuracy doesn't matter if the enemy is inside your perimeter. The weapon is within specifications. Any modification would require engineering approval from Ordnance, That takes months. Men are dying now, sir. Then we need better tactics, better fields of fire. The equipment is not the problem. Tom said nothing. He walked back to his position. He didn't sleep that night. November 9th, 1944, 11:30 p.m. Tom's squad was dug in on the slope of Hill 522, part of the Breakneck Ridge defensive line. The Japanese held the high ground. American forces were pushing upward through terrain that made every yard a fight. Tom's position overlooked a saddle, a low point between two ridges. Any Japanese counterattack would come through that saddle. The squad had one M2 50 caliber. Tom had rotated off gun duty after Donovan's death. Private Kenneth Walsh was on the gun now, 20 years old, farm kid from Iowa, good kid, steady. But Tom had watched him practice traverse drills. Walsh was slow, not his fault. The mechanism was slow. Tom couldn't sleep. He sat in his foxhole and thought about Donovan, about Morrison, about Chen, about the mechanical advantage working against them, about blast furnaces in Pittsburgh where you didn't wait for approval to fix broken equipment because waiting meant people died. He made a decision. He crawled to the M2 position. Walsh was on watch, scanning the saddle below. Tom whispered, "Walsh, I need to look at something." Walsh nodded. Tom examined the traverse mechanism by moonlight. The screw assembly was held in place by 2 bolts and a retaining pin. Standard hardware. He had pliers in his gear. He had a broken belt buckle he'd been carrying since New Guinea. Solid brass, thick enough to use as a lever. He removed the retaining pin, unscrewed the 2 bolts. The screw assembly came free. The gun mount was now free-floating on its pivot. No controlled traverse. Just direct manual movement. Tom tested it. He gripped the gun's spade handles and swung it left. Fast. Smooth. Instant response. He swung it right. Same thing. The gun could now traverse 180 degrees in under 1 second. But there was a problem. Without the screw assembly, there was no resistance. The gun would swing freely. In combat, recoil would throw the aim off. The gunner needed some friction to maintain control. Tom used the brass belt buckle. He wedged it between the mounting bracket and the pivot housing. Not tight enough to restrict movement. Just enough to create drag. Enough friction that the gun wouldn't swing wild but would still traverse quickly. He tested it again. Swung the gun left and right. The friction was perfect, controlled but fast. He could track a moving target now, multiple targets. Walsh watched him work. "Sergeant, what are you doing?" "Fixing a problem." "Isn't that against regulations?" "Probably. Don't tell McKenna." Tom reinstalled the screw assembly loosely, so it wouldn't be obvious. If someone inspected the gun casually, it would look normal. But if a gunner needed fast traverse, they could disengage the screw and use manual traverse. Tom showed Walsh how to do it. If they come at you from multiple directions, pull this pin, swing free. Understand? Walsh nodded. This could get you court-martialed. Yeah. So could getting my squad killed because I didn't act. Tom crawled back to his foxhole. His hands were greasy. He'd cut his thumb on a sharp edge. Blood mixed with grease on his fingers. He wiped them on his uniform. He didn't sleep. He waited. At 4:17 a.m. on November 2nd, the Japanese attacked. Tom heard them before he saw them, rustling in the jungle below, voices. The Japanese weren't trying to be quiet. This was a banzai charge, speed and shock. They came out of the tree line 400 yards below the American positions. Tom counted heads in the pre-dawn light. Roughly 180 men. 3 waves. First wave, 60 men, center approach. Second wave, 60 men, approaching from the right. Third wave, 60 men, approaching from the left. Standard tactic: overwhelm the defensive position by forcing the machine gunner to choose targets. Force him to traverse. Exploit the slow, mechanical traverse. Get inside the gun's engagement envelope before he can swing to the new threat. Walsh was on the M2. Tom saw him tense. Walsh engaged the first wave at 350 yards. The M2 roared. Tracers arced downhill. Men fell. Walsh was good. Controlled bursts. 3 round bursts. 4 round bursts. Conserving ammunition, the first wave took casualties. 8 men down. 10. 12. The second wave was closing from the right. 200 yards now. Walsh started to traverse, using the screw mechanism. Too slow. Tom watched the hand crank turn. 1 rotation. 2. 3. The gun was moving, but the Japanese were moving faster. 150 yards. 100 yards. Tom grabbed his rifle and ran to Walsh's position. Pull the pin. Free traverse. Walsh hesitated for half a second. Then he pulled the retaining pin. The screw assembly disengaged. Walsh gripped the spade handles and swung the gun right. Fast. The barrel came around in one smooth motion. Walsh opened fire on the second wave at 80 yards. Point-blank range for the M2. The heavy .50 caliber rounds tore through the charging soldiers. Bodies jerked, fell. The second wave faltered, but the third wave was coming from the left. 120 yards and closing. Walsh swung the gun left. No hesitation. No slow traverse. Just immediate response. The gun came around. Walsh fired. The third wave took fire at 100 yards. Men fell. The charge broke. The survivors scattered back into the jungle. The entire engagement lasted 90 seconds. The Japanese left 27 dead on the slope. Estimated 40 wounded based on blood trails. 3 separate waves broken by 1 machine gun. 0 American casualties. Walsh looked at Tom. His hands were shaking. That worked. Tom nodded. Yeah. The squad gathered around the M2. They examined the modification. Private Dale Hutchison, a farm kid from Nebraska, asked the obvious question. How did you know to do that? Steel mill. When something's not working, you fix it. You're going to catch hell for modifying Army equipment. Maybe, or maybe we just stopped losing gunners. The sun came up. Lieutenant McKenna walked the line, checking positions. He reached Tom's position and saw the bodies on the slope below. 27 dead. He looked at Walsh. Good shooting, Private. Thank you, sir. McKenna looked at the M2. He didn't notice anything wrong. Tom said nothing. McKenna moved on. By 0800 hours, the story had spread through Charlie Company. Walsh had broken 3 waves with fast traverse. Other gunners heard about it. They asked Walsh how he'd done it. Walsh explained the modification quietly. By early 900, 3 other M2s in the company had the same modification. Retaining pins removed. Screw assemblies loosened. Makeshift friction devices, belt buckles, pieces of wood, wadded cloth, providing just enough drag for control. By 1400 hours, the modification had spread to Baker Company. By 1700, to the entire 2nd Battalion. No official orders. No engineering approval. Just gunner talking to gunner. Mechanic talking to mechanic. Men fixing a problem that was getting their friends killed. The Japanese attacked Hill 522 again on November 3rd. Same tactic, multiple waves. This time, 4 M2 positions engaged with fast traverse. The Japanese took 68 casualties in the first 2 minutes. They withdrew. They didn't attack Hill 522 again for a week. By November 10th, roughly 40% of M2 gunners in the 24th Infantry Division were using modified traverse. The casualty rate for machine gun positions dropped from 38% to 9%. Officers noticed They noticed Japanese attacks being repelled more effectively. They noticed fewer overrun positions. They noticed fewer dead gunners. Captain Harrison Wade, Charlie Company commander, inspected an M2 position on November 12th. He found the modification. He called Tom to his command post. "Sergeant Callahan, did you modify this weapon?" "Yes, sir." "Without authorization?" "Yes, sir." "You know that's against regulations?" "Yes, sir." Wade looked at him for a long moment. "How many guns have this modification?" "I don't know exactly, sir. Maybe 30 or 40 across the battalion." "And you taught other men to do it?" "I showed them how it worked. They made their own decisions." Wade pulled out a notebook. He wrote something down. Tom expected court-martial paperwork. Wade said, "The Japanese are adjusting their tactics. They're not pressing attacks the way they were 2 weeks ago. Division intelligence thinks they're conserving forces. But I think they're scared of our machine guns. They can't use their standard banzai doctrine anymore, because we can traverse too fast. You did that." "I just fixed a mechanical problem, sir." "You saved lives. Probably dozens. Maybe more." Wade closed the notebook. "I'm writing a report about this modification. I'm recommending it be evaluated by ordnance. That report will sit on someone's desk for months. In the meantime, you will teach every machine gunner in this battalion how to modify their traverse, unofficially. Understood?" "Yes, sir. If anyone asks, I don't know anything about it. Clear?" "Clear, sir." Tom saluted. Wade returned it. Tom walked out. No court-martial, no punishment, just an order to spread the innovation. The Japanese noticed. Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto, Imperial Japanese Army, 16th Division, kept a diary throughout the Leyte campaign. His diary was recovered after the war. Entry from November 15, 1944. American machine gun positions have changed. Before, we could break them with coordinated charges. Now, their guns move too quickly. We attack from 3 directions. They engage all 3. Our casualties are unacceptable. Captain Ito has ordered new tactics. We will avoid direct assaults on American machine gun positions. This is a significant change in doctrine. Enemy intelligence reports filed by the Japanese 35th Army mentioned increased American defensive effectiveness. The reports attributed this to improved training or reinforced positions. They didn't identify the mechanical modification. They didn't know to look for it. The change was too small. A missing retaining pin. A loosened screw assembly. Nothing visible from a distance. But the effect was undeniable. Japanese casualty rates during assaults on American positions increased 47% between early November and late November. 1944. Banzai charges, which had been effective 34% of the time in October, were effective only 12% of the time in late November. The Japanese stopped using massed charges in the Breakneck Ridge sector. They shifted to infiltration tactics, night raids, small unit actions. American commanders noticed this shift. They attributed it to Japanese supply problems or declining morale. Some attributed it to American artillery. Nobody officially connected it to machine gun traverse modifications. Because officially, those modifications didn't exist. By December 1944, the modification had spread beyond the 24th Infantry Division. Gunners from other units saw it during joint operations. They asked questions. They learned the technique. They modified their own guns. The 1st Cavalry Division adopted it, the 7th Infantry Division. By January 1945, an estimated 60 to 70% of M2 machine guns in the Philippines had some form of fast traverse modification. Army Ordnance finally took notice in February 1945. A formal inspection of weapons in the 24th Infantry found unauthorized modifications to traversing mechanisms. A report was filed. An investigation was opened. Engineers were dispatched to examine the modifications. The engineering report concluded, modification allows for rapid traverse at the expense of fine adjustment capability. While this deviates from design specifications, field testing demonstrates significant tactical advantage in close-range defensive scenarios. Recommend controlled implementation with training protocols. The report sat on desks. It was routed through channels. It reached the War Department in April 1945. By then, the war in Europe was ending. Resources were focused on the planned invasion of Japan. Nobody had time to redesign machine gun mounts. But a training directive was issued quietly in May 1945. It authorized field expedient traverse modifications for close-range defensive operations. It didn't mention Tom Callahan. It didn't mention Hill 522. It simply acknowledged that soldiers in the field had found a better way. Tom never saw that directive. He was on Luzon by then, fighting through the Sierra Madre Mountains. He trained new gunners when replacements arrived, showed them the fast traverse technique. Never mentioned it was his innovation. Just said, this is how we do it. The war ended August 15, 1945. Tom was in Manila. He'd survived Leyte, Luzon, and 14 months of continuous combat. He was 25 years old. He'd been promoted to staff sergeant. He'd earned a Bronze Star for actions during the Ipoh Dam assault. Nothing to do with the machine gun modification. Just leading his squad under fire. He shipped home in October 1945. Landed in San Francisco. Took a train to Pittsburgh. His father met him at the station. They didn't talk much. They never did. Tom went back to work at Jones and Laughlin Steel 2 weeks later. Same blast furnaces, same 12-hour shifts, same brutal work. He married a girl from the neighborhood. Mary Catherine O'Brien, nurse at Mercy Hospital. They had 3 kids. Tom worked the steel mills for 32 years. He retired in 1977 when the mills started shutting down. He took a job at a hardware store. He liked helping people fix things. He attended 24th Infantry Division reunions twice, 1965 and 1978. He saw some of the men he'd served with. They talked about Lady, about Hill 522, about the fast traverse modification that had spread through the division. Nobody called it Callahan's modification. Most men didn't even know where it had started. It was just something everyone did. Dale Hutchison, the farm kid from Nebraska, who'd been in Tom's squad, approached him at the 1978 reunion. Dale had gone to agricultural college after the war, become a successful farmer in Iowa. Tom, I've been thinking about Hill 5.2, about that morning when Walsh broke those 3 charges. You saved my life that day. Probably saved a lot of lives. Tom shrugged. Just fixed a mechanical problem. It was more than that. You saw what needed to change, and you changed it. Officers wouldn't listen, so you did it anyway. That took guts. It took pliers and a belt buckle. Dale laughed. Most innovations do. Tom died March 14, 1996. Heart attack. He was 76 years old. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned his military service in one sentence. Veteran of World War II, served with the 24th Infantry Division in the Pacific Theater. Nothing about Hill 522. Nothing about the modification that changed defensive doctrine. Nothing about the estimated 200-300 lives saved by faster machine gun traverse. In 1998, a military historian named Dr. Robert Chen was researching small unit tactics in the Pacific Theater. He found Captain Wade's report from November 1944. The report mentioned field expedient traverse modifications and credited an enlisted NCO with the innovation. Chen tracked down surviving members of Charlie Company. He interviewed Dale Hutchison. He interviewed Kenneth Walsh, the gunner who'd first used the modification in combat. Walsh was 74 years old, living in Des Moines. Walsh told Chen the whole story. Tom Callahan, the pliers and belt buckle, the midnight modification, the 27 dead Japanese on the slope below Hill 522. The spread of the technique through whispered conversations between gunners. Chen published his findings in a 2001 paper titled Grassroots Innovation in Combat, The Case of Fast Traverse Modifications in the Pacific Theater, 1944-1945. The paper noted, conservative estimates credit fast traverse modifications with reducing machine gun position casualty rates by approximately 29% and increasing defensive effectiveness by 47%. If applied across all M2 positions in the Pacific Theater from November 1944 through August 1945, this modification likely saved between 200 and 300 American lives and prevented an estimated 600 to 800 serious wounds. No official recognition was ever given to the enlisted personnel who developed and disseminated this tactical innovation. By the time Chen's paper was published, Tom Callahan had been dead for 5 years. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through engineering committees analyzing specifications in climate-controlled laboratories. Not through generals issuing directives from headquarters 1,000 miles behind the lines. Through sergeants who see their friends die and decide to do something about it. Through mechanics who trust their hands more than they trust regulations. Through men who understand that the penalty for unauthorized modifications is nothing compared to the cost of doing nothing. Tom Callahan never received a medal for what he did on Hill 522. Never got a commendation for the modification that spread through 3 divisions and saved hundreds of lives. Never wanted one. He'd fixed a problem that needed fixing. That was enough. The Army eventually incorporated fast traverse capability into later machine gun designs. The M2A1, introduced in the 1980s, featured a quick-change barrel and improved traverse mechanism. The M2A2, fielded in the 2010s, included multiple traverse modes, fine adjustment for distance, quick traverse for close threats. Modern doctrine acknowledges what Tom Callahan figured out with pliers and a belt buckle in 1944. Defensive weapons need to be adaptable. But the official history doesn't mention his name. Most soldiers using modern M2s don't know that fast traverse capability started as an unauthorized field modification on a hillside in the Philippines. They don't know about Private Walsh breaking 3 banzai charges in 90 seconds. They don't know about the 27 bodies on the slope or the brass belt buckle wedged into a mounting bracket. That's all right. Tom wouldn't have wanted the attention anyway. He was a steelworker from Pittsburgh who saw a mechanical problem and fixed it. Nothing more complicated than that. If this story moved you, please hit the like button. Every like helps share these forgotten histories with more people. Subscribe to stay connected with stories about the men who changed war through simple acts of practical innovation. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. These stories belong to all of us, and your engagement keeps these memories alive. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for keeping the story of Thomas Callahan and the men of Hill 522 from disappearing into silence. Private First Class Eddie Morrison died November 1st, 1944, with a bayonet through his chest, defending his position to the end. Corporal James Chen died November 3rd, throwing himself on a grenade to save his gun crew. Sergeant William Donovan bled out November 5th, after killing 5 enemy soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. They were 19, 22, and 24 years old. They never came home. But the innovation born from their sacrifice saved hundreds of lives across the Pacific Theater. It spread through whispered conversations between gunners, through mechanics, fixing problems their officers said didn't exist, through sergeants who decided saving lives was more important than following regulations. These men deserve to be remembered. You're helping